This is Neds AFL Unpopular Opinions with Alastair Lynch, Tom Rockliff and Dylan Leach.
Hello everyone, welcome to yet another edition of Neds AFL Unpopular Opinions. My name's Dylan Leach. I'm joined by Alastair Lynch. Where in the world is Alastair this week? Remotely, where are you?
I'm in Townsville this morning. It's been a busy few days since the Lions game in Sydney. There was Sydney Sunday, then back to Brisbane, then Rockhampton, Mackay, Townsville today, and hopefully I'll get out of Townsville tonight.
If not, you can just hit up the Ville while you're up there, or the Mad Cow, very notorious nightclub there. You would have done some of your best stuff at the Mad Cow last night. You sound a bit rough.
Actually, yeah, it's probably been speaking rubbish for too much over the last few days. So that's the only reason. It was an early night.
Yep.
Plenty of work on again today. But no, I won't be getting to the discos tonight, I can guarantee you.
Yeah, well, there's still time for that flight to get cancelled again. Hello, Tom Rockliff.
Dill, how are you?
I am good. Now, boys, enough of the niceties. I've got a joke to start this show with, all right? You are going to love this joke. The AFL fined Ken Hinkley $20,000 for his post-match incident. That's the joke.
If only it was a joke. It's quite incredible. And Lynchy's wife obviously listens to the show. That's why he didn't go to any discos last night.
Yeah, but, that's not what he was telling us off here. Yeah,
the whole thing is a storm in a teacup for me. I have no issue. I think we actually spoke about it last week about Ginnivan's comment. I think Lynchy raised it and said, "Did we have an issue with it?" No. New age. No one really has an issue with it. You're given the opposition potentially ammo. Port Adelaide clearly used it. Ken seen it as offensive, whether it was or not. I don't see it that way. Ken's reaction after the game. I think you've got to put a little bit of context around Ken's reaction as well, because he's sitting in press conferences all week being asked if they lose, this is your last game as coach. So he's sitting there and he's got a build-up of emotion anyway, and that's not to excuse what he did. Hindsight, he probably doesn't do what he does, but realistically, what's he said? You're not flying to Sydney next week, Jack, which I think he actually half smirks at anyway. Ginnivan has no issue. Sicily has the right to stand up for his team as captain. No issue with that. Probably lingers a little bit too far. Once you start to carry Bruce off, I don't think there's any point talking to Ken after that. Then Mitchell goes into a press conference, blows up. Ken apologises straight away. It's just a mass. I think we live in the entertainment industry. We need to see personalities come through. We've loved what Hawthorn have done this year. We love what Ginnivan's done. Ken's old school. Ken's used it as motivation. I think Horn Francis went on radio and said, we as players, as 20-year-olds, all seen it as a joke, seen no harm in it whatsoever. Ken doesn't understand social media. He sees it as an old school. You're attacking us. You're coming after our footy club. You know what? We're going to put this on the whiteboard. We're going to go after this kid. He's disrespected us. He doesn't show us any respect. They're going to just breeze past us and go up to Sydney. I think move on. But the fine of $20,000 is the most ridiculous fine in AFL footy whatsoever. If you want to punish him, I get that. You do whatever you want to do. Give him and please explain. Give him a $5,000 suspended fine. I mean, you had Chris Scott only 3 years ago approaching Brisbane Lions players at quarter time who got a suspended fine of $20,000. So
suspended of $10,000. I've got lists of fines here. So this is this was actually in Robbo's article in the Herald Sun this morning. So Ken Hinkley got $20,000 for the "you won't be going anywhere next week." Think of the children. Of the children. Jason McCartney, $20K. All right, that's fair enough. You just don't get involved.
Well,
officials don't get. No, you don't do that. Alastair Clarkson, for what happened in that preseason game earlier in the year, $20,000. Scotty, $10,000 suspended for a bit of sass. I mean, even that was overreaction, in my opinion. Mick Bolthouse, back in 2010 with Stephen Milne, with the little altercation there, I think it was at three-quarter time, $7,500. And there's, of course, Clarko's got another $5K fine from his Hawthorn days. Kevin Sheedy, his infamous throat slit to Mitchell White in 2000. That was just, I don't know, maybe inflation's got the better of it, but $7,500. That seemed to be the going rate for cranky coaches. And then they also point out, and I would love to see how the Glassjaw types in our game would cope with the likes of Ricky Stewart. Now, for those of you playing at home and not aware who Ricky Stewart is, he's the coach of the Canberra Raiders, and he is known for his blow-ups. All right, he makes anything that these AFL coaches do look like, you know, they're having a tea party. Ricky got given a fined $25,000. He got fined $25,000 and a one-match suspension for quite possibly the most rugby league altercation ever when he referred to a Penrith Panthers player, Jamin Salmon, as a weak-gutted dog when he was a kid because he bullied his child back in primary school. Now, that doesn't get more rugby league than that. That is worthy of a fine, not what Ken Hinkley did.
You don't even have to go back that far for the rugby league. There was a New South Wales player sent off at half during the first half of that first Origin game. Was it Miles? Nate Miles?
Yeah.
In his face, pretty much abusing him as he walks past, and nothing of it. Like, I get where everyone's coming from that, yes, it's not a great look, blah, blah, blah. But realistically, was there any harm done whatsoever? No. Entertainment industry, I loved it. I thought it was great.
One of the things, and I wouldn't mind picking Alastair's brains about this, that has come out from it, I don't necessarily think any of the actual Hawthorn response was outrageous. Sicily sticking up for his teammate, Sam Mitchell getting emotional after a finals loss.
The only thing I'd say about Sam Mitchell is when he says an old man speaking to a kid.
That's crap.
That's rubbish.
And you work with some of these blokes, Lynchy. The ex-Hawthorn players in the media. I'm particularly talking about Jordan Lewis and Dermot Brereton, as well as Luke Hodge, who have had absolute glass jaws in the wake of this. If you were on a panel with those guys, would you remind them about what they did in their careers? Because the likes of Jordan Lewis and Dermot Brereton getting outraged about what Ken Hinkley did post-game, well, that's a bit rich, isn't it?
Absolutely. I reckon the whole thing has been ridiculously overblown. When we spoke about the Ginnivan thing last week, I mean, he said, see you in 2 weeks. There's so much mayo being put on this to get to the stage where now it's disrespecting the team. And to answer your question around the Hawthorn guys, well, those guys, they'll support their own, whatever happens. They'll just jump in and support their own passionately. I think, as we discussed last week, my probably major concern was, or advice would be for Jack or Jason Ackermanis would be, if you're going to keep putting your head up like this, it's going to get clipped. And we know that whether it be the fans of opposition clubs or coaches, they're waiting for you to trip, so they'll give you a clip on the way down. Now, I agree totally with what you said, Rocky. Kenny didn't handle it well. He knew that. He made a mistake there. But, yeah, it was hardly a heinous crime that he committed. And I just thought it was all totally overblown. And it was always going to come. I mean, every team that I go and watch who's playing against Hawthorn, they just can't wait to roll them so they can give them a clip. It was poorly handled. It's been blown out of proportion. And again, I reckon we talked about this last week. Ken Hinkley's been harshly assessed and harshly dealt with all year, whether it be on the back of big losses, on the back of big wins and his emotion. I just think it's ridiculous. What I would say, though, Rocky, and you'd probably be closer to it than this, that, it's costing him $20,000, which is ridiculous. But it seems like it might be a fair investment for Kenny, because he looks like he's aligned or united the Port Adelaide, whether it's the board or the supporter base, to jump behind him because he's flown the flag for his club, albeit not quite in the right way, but he has.
Yeah, he certainly has. Port Adelaide people reach out all the time, there's no doubt in that. And someone who's not a Ken fan whatsoever said, you know what? It's about time he showed emotion, and I'm fully behind him. And that's what I've wanted for so long from Ken, and loved every second of it. It's a disgrace that he's being fined and right on his back.
Well, some Port fans have gone from hanging up signs outside Alberton saying sack Hinkley to starting a GoFundMe to pay Kenny's fine. The Adelaide Advertiser this morning has reported that it's raised more than $6,000 in 24 hours to help pay Ken's $20,000 fine.
The thing with it it is as well is if the Coaches Association had a backbone, they would go in and fight this.
They're a social club. They're not a union.
They should go in and try and defend it and get it thrown out because it is ridiculous. Like 20,000, I think we've all acknowledged that. And even Hawthorn, I think Ginnivan, if he had his time again, I think admitted that he probably wouldn't have said the comment. There was nothing in his comment that he said anyway. We all loved it and added theatre, and it's just it's a joke, to be honest.
Also, if I was Jack Ginnivan right now, I would arrange to get to Sydney on Friday and get a selfie with Brodie Grundy and then post it and said, see, I told you I would see him in 14 days. That would be the ultimate rascal act. So, Jack, some inspiration for you. Let's park the Ken Hinkley fine. We're all in agreement that it's a $20,000 fine. And if we actually lived up to the show's name, Unpopular Opinions, we'd be like, yes, he should have got $20. Think of $20,000. Think of the children. The AFL probably should clarify that what the fine is for, because what was it? Conduct unbecoming? Yeah, but it also sets up a horrible precedent in the future for something that's basically a paper card or a parking ticket.
We should clarify what he said. Clarify what he said, because I think there's some of us that are trying to work out how do you get $20,000 fine from what appeared to be nothing much. Sure, not a great winner in the time, but we've seen some comments been fined before, but they've been homophobic comments and that sort of stuff. Has he said any more than what we think? It's just. I think they should at least clarify that.
I think there may have been an F word involved, but that's it. Moving right along, and something a bit more fun to talk about than Ken's fine. The Brisbane Lions, 44 points down, the second greatest finals comeback in history, equal with the 1970 grand final. Now, Tom, I know you've given me a lot of crap throughout the year for leaving during the Richmond-Brisbane game, but you've actually went to bed at 3/4 time of the Lions Port game, watching it at home.
Yeah, I
didn't expect that.
No, I certainly did.
But can I just pose this question to both of you, ex-captains of the club? Lynchy, in your case, is that win up there with the Premier? Is that win probably next best to the 3 flags that you won for Brisbane?
Probably just behind the Premiership. That's one of the great wins of the club. To come back from where they came from, away game, GWS in great form. They were losing in numerous positions. Yeah, one of the great victories that, as I'm with Rocky, I was at the game, so I couldn't go to bed, but I thought they were gone.
And just one for you, Rocky, because you played in the infamous Miracle on Grass back in 2013, and we were talking off air about it. What's the difference between... So obviously the final is a more important win, but which is the more dramatic win? Is it that, or is it the Miracle on Grass in 2013, Ash McGrath?
I'll probably bias because I was a part of it, but I think the more dramatic one is the Ash McGrath one. The moment he marks it on the siren, like Geelong could have taken the sting out of that game, and literally Daniel Merritt gets called to play on, which if he doesn't play on, it doesn't happen. Yeah. And just the way it transitioned, McGrath takes a mark, kicks it after the siren, is more dramatic. The comeback from that. So I would say that's more dramatic, but I would say the win on the weekend was better. The circumstances around that, 44 points down against what Lynchy said, Giants on fire, just they had no right. They found a way to get back into it and then seal it. GWS, they will lose so much sleep. I think out of 240 minutes of footy in 2 finals, they're in front for 218 minutes of them or something like that. So they've been behind for 6 minutes in each game and not playing. That'll give them nightmares. And I think, was it Daniels at the top of the goal square where he kicks one out of midair, just timing, and everything went right for Brisbane to win that game. And now they're a good chance to win that and go into a grand final.
Joe Danaher. Who else but Joe? And he's now done it twice in finals for Brisbane. Of course, there was that goal where there was 50 Richmond players in the goal square that he kicked to win that elimination final. He kicked the sealer in Saturday night's semi-final against the Giants. For all the frustration, for all the roller coaster that is Joe Danaher, Lynchy, would you say that's what makes him great?
Yeah, it's the life of Joe. There's ups and downs. I'm not sure what they showed post game on our coverage, but we were looking at it during the game. The ups and downs, the easy misses, the mistakes, the lack of chase at times. But you got to say, and we've said this before, over the last couple of years, Joe Danaher has been first-class player whilst still having that mix of uniquely Joe stuff. He does what he does. But what he did in that last quarter to kick the goal from row 6, and he was always going to kick that. He didn't flush it. Actually, it was never going to miss it. Sorry, yeah. I mean, he didn't flush it. It was a bit of a mung off the boot and just faded back nicely. But the second one from 30 metres out, that was the real pressure kick. And to go back and nail that, it was amazing. The contested mark against the best contested defender in the competition. Very, very good, huge game. He's stood up in finals. He's played some really good finals, and that was his best on the weekend.
The mark was sensational. I thought I went back and watched it, as you said, Dill. I went to bed at 3/4 time and got up and watched the last quarter again on Sunday morning at 5 in the morning. It was incredible, and Joe was never going to miss those goals. Like, you back him in 9 times out of 10 when he's having a shot from there. I would have been nervous if he was having a shot 10 metres out directly in front, because I reckon he would have missed him. And
another player too that's just still amazes me, and I'm sure it amazes you, especially because you played with him, Dane Zorko.
Yeah, incredible. Incredible. Like, his ability just to adapt to different things. And when Brisbane had those injuries off half back at the start of the year, it was like, well, who's going to replace him? Zorko's, we thought he was sort of not on the slide, but a more limited role, probably across half forward. But he's gone half back, revelation, and he's ability just to pop up. Like, he has no right to be in the goal square kicking goals, but he's had 25, kicked 2, all Australian at half forward, half back. He won 3 BNFs before he started, or 4 BNFs before he started. He's won 4 or 5 now at the lines. He probably wins this year again. He's been the most consistent over the year. Lockie will go close to winning the Brownlow, but I think Lockie's second half of the year has been better, whereas Zorko's been consistent throughout the whole year.
Can I put this to you both about the Lions? I know a lot of us have been caught up in Hawthorn's run to the finals this year out of nowhere. But I would argue that Brisbane have been as enjoyable a team to watch in the second half of the season, if not more than the Hawks, because where they have come from, because, you go back to I think it's like our round 7 show where we're talking about what's gone wrong, why, it's looking like they're not going to make finals. There's this reason, that reason. As both of you as ex-players, surely you are just loving the ride the Brisbane Lions are on. I mean, 6 preliminary finals, yes, they're consistent, but it says a lot about the team that they're at this stage.
Yeah, well, I think if you go back, I think Lynchy had sacked Fagan and wanted everyone to go on in round 7 in our podcast. I'm only joking. But their second half of the years has been better than anyone in the competition. And the 2 games that they've lost in that, they were smashing the Giants in the first quarter and then stopped, and they did the same to Collingwood. So their second half of the year has been as good as anyone. And we speak about it sometimes that you might need a loss, you might need to have a loss on the way in that sharpens you up, and maybe they were the 2 losses that Brisbane needed to have.
Well, yeah, I think they have been very good, and it's probably you mark against expectations, and Hawthorn's expectations were very low, especially zipping 5 to start with. So I'd have them as the best, but with a poor start, Brisbane on the back of their injuries. Well, their injuries, I mean, you'd like the players to be available, but we've seen much more of Lohman, Morris because of injuries. So we've actually, I reckon, discovered a couple. And I think, and you might be going to mention it anyway, we've spoken in past weeks, the work that Ashcroft is doing is incredible. Like, he's Lockie Neal-like, where he doesn't fall over, he doesn't fumble. Sort of think Simon Black, my great teammate, he wouldn't fall over. And that was what we saw evidence over the last few weeks of Ashcroft. Doesn't go to ground, doesn't fumble, keeps competing. And when he gets the ball, he puts people into better spaces. So last week it was 20 disposals, 10 score involvements. This week, I think it was 27 or something like that, and 10 score involvements. He hits the scoreboard. He's a first-class player. player, and he's a star. Absolutely, he's a star now. What is he? 30 games into his career.
The perfect highlights where he's got about 6 blokes hanging off him, and he just finds a way to get a handball away and kick a goal. And for Lions fans, I know they're not focused on it, but his younger brother, I think, was best on ground in another final as well, which they'll have next year as well.
Can I go to the 2 teams that have been eliminated? I think you can possibly see 2 very different kind of paths for Hawthorn and the Giants. The Giants are going to have some serious psychological scars from this final series, whereas Hawthorn are going to be incredibly motivated going into next year. Who would finish on top of each other? Who finishes higher next year? Who do you rate more going into next year?
Well, you'd say Hawthorn with what we expect them to bring in as well. There's been a couple of players already commit to them next year, and the season's not done yet. But you would say Hawthorn and the Giants, that mental toll will be interesting to see how big of an effect it has on them. They need to probably address it as quick as they can. Sydney, they had that game sewn up and fall over, and then the Lions on the weekend. So they need to address that pretty quickly, move on. And if they let it linger, which I think you look back, Port Adelaide, all the talk out of Port Adelaide from 2007 was they never addressed that grand final loss. They just let it linger, and they all went away on holidays, came back, never looked at it, never addressed it, and had years of pain after it. I think the Giants probably need to address it this week, if they haven't already. Address it and focus on it, but also go away and enjoy a holiday now. But I think they need to address it.
And address even style late in that, or in the last quarter, just the way they were going about it. I think everyone in the stadium knew they had to score another goal at least to win the grand final. Win that final. But there was this intent to just knock the ball on and just get it out into space, which is sort of counterproductive, really. I mean, you don't want just the ball to spill out. And I think it was Toby Green on a couple of occasions just grabbed the ball and, an erratic handball over the head just to get it forward. I think in those situations, especially when you're well up, another stoppage is not a bad thing, and especially when they've got big midfielders. But yeah, I found that just fascinating, that this intent just to keep the ball going, and often it just spilled out to the Lions and they scored at the other end.
So to speak to that as well, when you obviously Lynch and I play, but you taught when you're trying to kill a game, you're better off locking the footy up, giving away a free kick and being able to set up behind that than keeping the footy live. So in that instance, it's better for Toby Green to kick it into the second row of the grandstand, so that then they can actually set up around it, get a bit of control around it, instead of keeping a live footy, because it's near impossible to defend then. So Toby Green's potentially better off getting done holding the ball, locking it in, or get a stoppage, and then you can get extras around, you can set up the way you want. That's how you get your set plays in place. It's impossible to get set plays in a live footy, live transition.
It's also safe to say, particularly in the age of the 6-6-6 starting positions and the stand rule, that there is no such thing as a comfortable lead anymore. 44-point leads, 50-point leads, they're always in jeopardy. And you would think as the game develops, coaches are now looking at ways, it's like we need to think of new ways to maintain leads. Like you're saying, you're better off having it delivered out of bounds as a tactical kind of thing.
Well, you sit on the ball, get done holding the ball, just delay for as long as you can, giving the footy back. But to your point, the week before, we're watching Brisbane and Carlton, and it's 60-0. And it got to a point where it felt like if Carlton get the next one, they're actually a chance to potentially win this when it should be game over. So there is no comfortable lead. But yeah, it's just those moments. You've just got to, and again, you don't want to harp on it, but Daniel's like playing on, kicking out of midair. You're better off when you've got a lead, give the set shot, because then you've got another 30 seconds taken off the clock. He goes back, takes another 30 seconds off the clock, and all they have to do is kill 2 minutes of that game by uncontested marks or taking a set shot or doing things like that. So there is ways around it, and there'll be some great learnings out of it for them. Unfortunately, they're out now, but hopefully they can bounce back.
I wouldn't mind going 3 steps back to actually bring up Port Adelaide, not the coach, but Port Adelaide themselves, because that's obviously gotten lost in what happened after the game. But you, Tom, as an ex-Port player, of course, you built the foundations of Port Adelaide. You are the legend of Alberton. That was as good a finals win as Brisbane. That no wonder they got their chest beating this week. It's just really put that absolute shot in the arm for Port Power this week?
30 seconds in, you knew it was a different team to the week before. Their intensity around the footy, their aggression, their ability to tackle, and it went from the first bounce until the last. The Darcy Byrne-Jones tackle on Jarman Impey at half-back was sensational. They just had a different intent about them, and they certainly came out with the aggression. If they play like that this week, it sets up as a ripper against Sydney, but fantastic to be able to turn it around. Yes, disappointing the week before, and there was question marks over them and ability to play in big games. Yes, they should have probably been further in front. They dominated all the key areas that they wanted to dominate. They still got their issues going forward, but that they found a way to hang on and win it. But it was just a different team.
This is fascinating, this game this week. When you think of where Port have come from over the last couple of weeks, and the fact that they take on Sydney, who are the premiership favourites at the SCG, most exciting team, or one of the most exciting teams in the competition, and Port have won their last 8 games against the Sydney Swans. It's extraordinary, and they'll go in underdogs. Yeah. And after a 112-point win,
six weeks ago.
A month ago. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an amazing game. Just the mindset. I mean, you talk about small margins earlier, but that's in the subconscious of Swans players. They know the scars of 6 weeks ago. They know the historical scars of the last 8 games. It's going to be a fascinating game to see how this one pans out.
Lynchy, your third of the three-peat premierships, the Lions went the long way. You lost your first, and then you came back in the qualifying and had to have a bit more of an adventure to get into the grand final. What would be? Do you look at Port and think this is the kind of result that makes you as a team kind of thing?
The win on the weekend, when there was so much pressure on everyone, individuals both on and off the field, it does bring you closer together. This can be huge to just build a group, to give you confidence, to take on anyone, really. I mean, no one really gave Port Adelaide a chance to bounce back from such a disappointing loss to Geelong. This gives them every chance. I mean, and we know with this competition, if you're on, you can win against anyone, and we're down to the final 4. Their season is very much alive against the Sydney Swans, as I think all clubs are. The Lions in exactly the same position, come from a long way back to be now very much in contention. So I think this is a bonding week for Kenny Hinkley and his team, and part of that mix is what happened after the game. His supporters, his critics and his supporters, the board members, players are all behind him. So they'll be very confident this week. Yeah,
and it's a great point I reckon Lynchy makes there, that you can tell that they went in with the mentality. Yes, the Ginnivan comment was one part of it, but they also referenced the media written them off. Everyone had written them off. So it was Port Adelaide versus the world. If they can continue on that, that's all you need to find. You need to find that little bit of motivation, particularly late in the year, to get you up. And it has to be that for Port Adelaide. It's us versus the world. That's what it has to be for them. And I think they can carry it on.
And as someone who built the foundations of Port Adelaide, the idea of Port versus the world suits the mantra of the Port Adelaide Football Club. A Port Adelaide, a Collingwood, those sorts of clubs having us versus them is perfect for them.
It's perfect. It sets up perfectly for the Port Adelaide Footy Club, because it always has been that way in the sample. It's Port versus the rest. If you weren't a Port supporter, you hate it. And now it's them. It's Port Adelaide versus the rest of the competition.
If you look at the history of the SANFL, the reason why the Adelaide Crows exist is basically out of pure utter spite for Port Adelaide. Look up your history books. If you're Sydney,
can you imagine? Sorry, can you imagine Kenny Hinkley in his presentation this week? He'd be saying, "We beat this mob by 112 points 6 weeks ago. We've beaten them the last 8 games." And they've got us dramatic underdogs. They don't respect us. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where he'll be launching.
That is a perfect recipe for Port.
That'll be his motivation, is that no one's given us a chance again. Look, everyone's written us off, said we got up for this and we played our grand final. Let's prove them wrong.
For the case for Sydney and Geelong, so obviously the Geelong play the Lions, the Swans play Port. You've had the week off, but you've had 2 teams come off roller coaster, emotional, full-on semi-finals, surely they would be delighted that they've come off these types of results.
Yes and no, I think. Yes, for the fact that they were close games and neither team could really cruise in that game. But we know Geelong's record off the byes generally isn't great. That they don't generally like a week off, even though they belted Port Adelaide by 84 points only last week. But when you have that pre-finals bye, I think it becomes a bit more irrelevant, the fact that they've only played one game in 21 days or whatever it is now. So I think that they're going to have to be sharp. And if they're off early, if Geelong and Sydney are off in the first 5 or 10 minutes, it could be a long way back for them. If Port start fast and Brisbane start fast, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every club's had their ups and downs. I think you were barracking for Geelong to be poor. Dylan, weren't you, earlier in the year, and you thought you'd got the result, but they're bouncing back. And Dangerfield makes such a difference. And I think maybe the breaks for players like Patrick Dangerfield and in particular Tom Stewart sets him up beautifully to sort of hit this game absolutely flying. So, yeah, they'll be confident. The problem is, when you have that break and you're watching two teams play, the team that you're playing is the one that won. They're feeling good about themselves and obviously have done some good things. So there is that element. Geez, yeah, they look pretty good that day. But I reckon that Chris Scott and his team will be able to pick some holes in Brisbane's first half or their first three quarters that they'll be focusing on, and also how they turned it around. And as you touched on, Rocky, the likes of Zorko. I thought Jared Berry played probably his best game of footy that I've seen for quite a while. I know he's had more disposals in games, but I thought he had a huge impact as well. But, yeah, that would have been analysed over the last couple of days for Geelong. They'll set themselves up for a big game.
It's set to be a rip snorter of a weekend of football. We can't wait. You know what else people can't wait for? They can't wait for Ryan and Rocky to finally get one up in preliminary final week, because it's time for the Snapshot.
All the betting trends you need to know from the world of footy. This is the Snapshot.
It's that part of the week where we get stuck into some betting. We've got two games to jump into this week. Rocky, though, let's talk about last week really quickly. A surprise with the results we have.
It was both games were cracking in the end, and both games could have gone the other way. I mean, Hawthorn had the shot late in the game to potentially win that, hit the post, and then Giants probably thought they had it wrapped up, and that's 2 weeks in a row, and then they get overrun. So, exciting times and two really cracking games of footy, and a bit overshadowed by a few incidents, but ripping footy.
I'm sure you boys have already spoken about the Hinkley-Sicily drama, so we're not going to get into that. Let's look ahead, though, to Swans and Port Friday night. Your boys in a prelim. You've got to be excited. And I've done the math. I've looked over some of the trends. The Swans are 1-5 at home when they're favoured at the line. Are you happy to take Port Adelaide here?
Yeah, I am actually. I think Port Adelaide's record against the Swans, and you only have to go back 6 weeks. I know it was at Adelaide Oval. Team's probably in different form, 112 points, like blown away. And then I believe Port Adelaide, you're the numbers man, have beaten Sydney the last 8 times or something along those lines. They've got a really, really good record against them, play the SCG well. So you'd certainly take Port Adelaide at the line, and I wouldn't be surprised if Port win the game as well.
That's a big call. Charlie Dixon, do you think he plays this week?
Yeah, certainly does. I think he comes in, Marshall out, obviously with concussion protocols, but different beast at the SCG. We know it's a smaller ground. Footy comes in. Charlie, he may not mark the footy, but he doesn't get outmarked very often. So he can just stand there, provide a contest, get it to ground. Then you've got Willie Rioli and these guys cleaning up the scraps and knocking them over. So I think he's going to be really, really important actually to the dynamic of Port Adelaide this week and the way they structure. So he may stretch their defence as well. The Swans, we know they're probably a little bit undersized in defence. So if you play Georgiadis, Dixon, Radaglia, it could potentially stretch the Swans down there.
Rioli was outstanding last week against my Hawks. I'm sure the punters will be all over him this week. I know this is a tough question. Butters and Wines both had 30 touches when these two sides met earlier in the year. Do you think either can rack up the disposals in this one?
Yeah, I'd probably lean more to Ollie. Again, same thing. Sydney play that tight, incontested game style. The SCG, Ollie always in and around those contests. Butters is more your burst player, which I think they'll have some time and attention into him, not allow him to burst out of those stoppages. So if I was going to take anyone for 30 plus, I'd be leaning towards Ollie.
There you go. I'm sure there'll be plenty of value in that one. Let's look ahead to Saturday, Cats v Lions. We've seen this one a number of times, a genuine rivalry game. The two narratives I want to ask you about, and you might say these are a myth, Brisbane at the G and the Cats off the bye. Which one worries you more?
Well, Geelong's off the bye, I think. I mean, their record after having a week off's not great, and that sounds stupid after they beat Port Adelaide by 84 points only a fortnight ago with a week off. But funnily enough, it's more probably a mid-season thing for Geelong that they struggle to get up. I know that their coaching staff would have made sure that they're ready to go, cherry ripe. I'm not a massive believer in Brisbane's record at the G. They don't play a great amount of games there. They're a kick away in a grand final last year from holding up the Premiership Cup. So I'm sort of, and it's probably more heart than anything, leaning towards the Lions winning that one as well. So I'm tipping a 20-year reunion of Port Adelaide and Brisbane Lions grand final.
I like the sounds of that. I've done the numbers for this game as well. Brisbane are a perfect 5-0 at the line as the away underdog over the last 12 months. You've already said you're with the Lions, so I won't ask you if you're going to back the line there. But the last two meetings have fallen under the total. We're getting 172.5 points this week combined. Do you think this is going to be a low-scoring game?
No, I think it'll be the other way. I think it'll be high scoring. We know that Brisbane can score and can score heavily when they get going, and we've seen the Cats as well. They like to play that open brand of footy. They did it to Port Adelaide only a fortnight ago, and you can often in a final when the game gets away. So if potentially one team gets that gap, the other team just opens the floodgates and tries to win the game of footy. So you can get heavily scored against. So I think it'll go overs.
Well, if Brisbane kicks straight, it might go overs. That's the deciding factor. That might take them all the way through to the granny. Let's look ahead to Monday. We've got the Brownlow coming up. Just want to get a tip from you here. We've got Cripps and Dacos, both around the $2.50 mark. Lockie Neal, once again, the value at $8. Is it a three-horse race, or do you see a dark horse emerging?
Yeah, I think it is a 3. I think Paddy Cripps will probably win his second, but don't be surprised if Lockie Neal wins his third as well. I think his second half of the year, and no one polls votes against him. Zorko may pinch a few off him this year, more so than previous years, but Lockie Neal, he stats up so well and has an impact around the contest. So, and I wouldn't discount Dacos either. I mean, some of his games were outstanding. I think it'll be a 3-horse race. Bontempelli will be there about. Teeny might be out there early. He'll get run down. But, it sets up as an exciting count. I don't think there's a out-and-out clear standout like we've had previously in markets. But obviously, Lockie won at $13 or $14 last year.
He did, and I know Dill's tipping a dual Brownlow medalist like he does every single year. So I'm sure he'll be happy to see.
You throw enough darts, Ryan, one will hit.
Ryan and Rocky are cooking up another multi. Surely it gets up this week.
Speaking of throwing darts, we only got one leg up last week. You took Jason Horne-Francis 2+, Lockie Neal 30+. I took the Hawks to win and Jesse Hogan 3+. Hogan was the only leg that got up in our multi. What do we got this week?
Yeah, well done on the Hogan leg. Other than that, we were horrible. I'm going to take Willem Drew for 20+. I think he'll get a run with roll, so he'll be around that footy, and I think he'll get a lot of inside handball. So I'm going to take him 20+ in the Swans versus Port Adelaide on Friday night. And then Josh Dunkley, I think he will have 25+. He just contributes week in, week out. It'll be a tough contest against the Cats. I think he'll have 25+.
Can't disagree with any of those legs. I am going, based on what we saw last week, Jace Berger went 20+. He was one of the stars of that game against the Hawks. We're getting a good price for him to get some more disposals under his belt. And I like Charlie Cameron, 2+ goals as well against the Cats. $11.64. What do you think?
Yes. Well, again, I can't disagree with any leg that you've put forward, and I go in confident every single week with our multis, and it hasn't been successful. But $11.64, I think we'll have a collect this week.
Yeah, we're running out of time here. We still only got the one multi up for the season, one more than NRL. But, we still got, 2 weeks to get one. So fingers crossed, mate.
Yeah, good luck. Good on you, Ryan.
You're listening to Neds AFL Unpopular Opinions.
You are listening to Ned's AFL Unpopular Opinions. Dylan Leach and Alastair Lynch back in the studio. Ryan and Rocky have just done the snapshot. Rocky, outstanding snapshot.
Yeah, it is. The multi, we only went 1 from 4 again last week, but quietly confident this week. I'll go early. I'll get it out there before we, I know we're about to wrap up the show, but let's go early with what our multi is and see what you guys think.
Okay.
Lynchy, we've got same game multi, Willem Drew and Jace Burgoyne to have 20 plus in that game. And then Geelong versus Brisbane, Dunkley 25 plus and Charlie Cameron 2 plus, multi it up $11.64.
Legs 11. I don't mind that.
Nice. Sounds very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Might be worth just adding also, we didn't speak about it, Jace Burgoyne's game, Rocky. The move to put him to halfback, he looked like a 180 game All-Australian halfback flanker. And when he snapped that goal, it was almost like when Dacos snaps, is about to have a snap for goal. You just go, oh, that's going through.
Yeah.
What a class act. So well done to the coaching staff and Jace. He was incredible.
Big game play. He probably should have won the Showdown medal. Willem Drew won it earlier this year, but he was outstanding in that one as well. And his final, he was clearly best on for Port Adelaide last week.
All right, time to wrap up on Ned's AFL.
We can't wrap up, can we, Richie, without talking about the biggest AFL story of all time.
We have. We talked about Ken Hinkley getting a $20,000 fine. We opened the first 10 minutes of the show on it.
There's been someone on this podcast that's cried about it for 5 years, that media need to stop talking about Dusty going to the Gold Coast. They need to let it go. And then when he retired, they said, oh, now we can finally put it to bed. He's not going to the Gold Coast. Well, 3 weeks later, he's calling the Gold Coast and wants to go there, Dill. So can you give us your thoughts?
Okay. Thoughts on Dusty?
And are you in on this, Dylan? Did you know about this all along?
No, I did not know about this all along. And it's interesting you bring that up. I've obviously had a bit of time to stew and digest and contemplate what this is. And from a pure yellow and black perspective, because you are going to get that from me, is I think
the first 3 quarters.
Yeah, thank you, Lynchy. Well, the same applies for Tom. He might go.
Only when they're winning finals.
Yeah.
I had my son's birthday.
Okay, yeah, good on you. Anyway, I feel that a lot of Richmond fans chose to believe that it wasn't true. We took Dusty at his word. We took the club at their word. And if that happens, there's a bit of, well, you kind of lied to us here. We kind of feel a bit misled and a bit led on. In saying that, yes, Dusty's allowed to pursue whatever options he has post-football, and he's done every single thing possible you can ask for a player, and he will always be a Richmond hero, a Richmond legend, a Richmond immortal even, for what he has done and contributed. What I would say, though, is I think it justifies my belief that if we are going to have these sorts of situations, the AFL needs to adopt an NRL-style approach to this. So if Dustin thought he was going to the Gold Coast but says he's going to have one more year at Richmond, then make it a farewell tour and make it a celebration, not with this lingering thing, because Richmond fans would rather know that way than have David Schwartz and Brendan Favola say, no, he's moving. Like, we don't want to hear it from them. We want to hear it from Dustin. Another thing too is...
It's hard to hear it from him if he doesn't speak.
Well, it'd be nice if Richmond said it or Ralph Carr, his manager, said it. The other thing too is this real... And Caroline Wilson articulated it brilliantly on Footy Classified last night. Is this really how you want to end your career? You want to end your career where you're not at 100%. He's 2024... He's been injured. His back's been injured. He's had a couple of good goals, but really the Dustin Martin, if his name wasn't Dustin Martin, with the form he was in, he probably would have gone back to the VFL to play to get some form. Is this really how you want to end your career? Playing 13, 14 games for the Gold Coast as a cameo for a few touches, especially if you're in 2024 form? if this spin-off series of Dusty happens, it's not going to be Fraser. It's going to be Joey.
What?
Like, this is... And also, does the Gold Coast Suns want to be a club for retirees, or does it want to build its own stars up? Does it want to build its own stars with their own stories? If Dustin Martin was going to a suburban club to help out and actually contribute and just to have a kick, that's fine. But he's going to an AFL club, treating it like a suburban club. I just want to have a kick around with my mates. Now, you're Dustin Martin and you can do that. But if that's the reputation that the Gold Coast Suns, if that's what the Gold Coast Suns want, well, that's what they're getting.
Luke Hodge did it. He retired, didn't he? And then went to Brisbane.
Well, I reckon there's been a few examples, and I reckon one of the important things would be what it would be the arrangement and what are the expectations. I don't think it does. If it doesn't go well, if he makes the move to go to the Gold Coast and it doesn't pan out, I don't think it tarnishes his reputation.
No, it won't.
One iota. He's one of the absolute. He'll be a legend in the AFL Hall of Fame moving forward. If he wants to go up there and they feel he can contribute in a small way, but that would be. It's not just his on-field impact. It's got to be. He's got to be able to add to the culture of the playing group and set standards. So if he's prepared to do that or wants to contribute to do that, I don't think just bringing in a consultant for 12 games is probably the go. He's got to add something to the day-to-day professionalism of being a pro footballer on the Gold Coast. But, yeah, I would say if you can have the right arrangement, say go all in. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. Yeah. But I think he's got an opportunity. And it'll be so exciting for him if he's got the opportunity to do something for the very first time with the Gold Coast and take them to the finals. There's enough of a carrot there if he's motivated to do it. But I feel it needs to be a 7-day-a-week commitment. It's not just front up and play a dozen games.
That's what you do. That's what ex-players do who have a great career in the AFL and then do Brett Harvey and play in the Northern Footy League for North Heidelberg or whatever. That's that Gold Coast Suns. If they want to be treated like that kind of club with what apparently Dustin is in negotiations for, then that's not the right fit for what they want to be as well. So with the benefit Alastair, with the benefit of time, everyone is fine with what Dustin is doing. But right now it's a bit like, mate, we just gave you the ultimate farewell tour. You go back with it and you told us you're retiring, and yeah, it just feels a bit like.
Suck it up, dude.
Well, no, I would rather had known that he was going next year. I think the system in the NRL works better, where So, for instance, in your last year at Brisbane, you knew you were leaving. Would you, if you had signed with Port Adelaide?
No, I don't. I think I like the way the AFL does it, but I think.
But you can understand where I'm coming from.
I think the sour taste potentially in Richmond fans' mouth was he fully invested this year? I think you look back and you go, Dusty looked like he was sort of at the end and it was retirement, but potentially wasn't invested in what was happening there.
And also, I think there's also a bit of resentment towards Damien Hardwick amongst Richmond fans now because, he said, I'm burnt out, I'm tired, and then 2 months later he signed up with a new club saying, I've got new toys and I'm really excited. And even in his first press conference when he was referring to Richmond as that club, it was like, excuse me? And now he's taking Dusty, he's taking Daniel Rioli. It's like, mate. Anyway.
You got any tissues there, Lynchy, that we can just...
No, you got three flags.
Three flags.
We're grateful for it, but it's like...
Suck it up, dude.
You've taken enough souvenirs from your old office.
The only reason you got the souvenirs.
Lynchy, I know people who are still bitter about you moving from Fitzroy to the Bears, all right? So football fans take... Yeah.
So do I.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I don't think there was anything unreasonable about what I just said there.
No, I don't think so.
No. But moving right along. What are we looking forward to this weekend outside of the preliminary finals?
Well,
Brownlow?
I think the one thing that we need to mention that we probably haven't is Mackie Andrews' contract as well.
Oh, so huge.
That is a massive story, that $12 million over 10 years, huge contract. And I think he's going to be a star. Huge risk, but that's probably what I'm looking forward to is the next couple of big contracts. Harley Reid's going to get one and who else? But, the big contracts are in vogue and Lynchy, our man, was the first one to do the 10-yearer.
Yeah.
And now they're all following suit.
You might have be able to hold a meeting somewhere for the 10-year club. So it used to be you could do the same joke. You could do the same joke KB does about the 400 Gamer Club about meeting in the phone booth.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I got the smallest of the 10 years, though.
No, with inflation at the time, though. I think you got to add a bit of mayo to the inflation at the time.
Yeah, did very well. Yes.
And of course, before I go, your Brownlow tip and your 2 grand finalists.
I'm going for the 20-year reunion. I'm going for both Port and Brisbane to play off.
Why might that be?
Surprise.
Why might that be?
Well, Neds are going to fly us down and give us cashy for a week. So I'm going to MC and we'll get Wakes and Lynchy to tell their story. But I actually think they both can win. And obviously, being an ex-player of both, I hope they do.
Yeah, you're guaranteed to go into the rooms no matter who wins at those.
Well, I'm not sure. We know we've seen that not quite happen in the past.
Maybe not you and Mitch Robertson, but there you go.
And Brownlow, I think Paddy Cripps, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lockie Neal did it again.
Lynchy?
Yeah, Lockie Neal for me and Sydney Brisbane grand final. I'm tipping.
Yeah, I'm the same for the grand final as Lynchy, so it could be the State of Origin grand final, so to speak. Brisbane versus Sydney, the AFL's dream grand final, really. And Brownlow, I'll go with the rank outsider, just because there's always umpires' pets that do well. Caleb Sarong. Every chance, okay. $21 at last checking. It could be a Pritis-esque type Brownlow result.
We know what deal. You say it. Say it every year.
Dual Brownlow medalists. There's Sam. So like Sam McClure that has said Dusty's going to the Gold Coast. We're getting dual Brownlow medalists as well. I think I'll find out what that's paying. I need to look that up. Another thing too I'm looking forward to this weekend is I am stoked that the VFL Grand Final is actually between 2 standalone clubs.
Yeah,
Werribee and Southport. For all the mess that the VFL is, having 2 standalone clubs in the grand final is a magnificent result.
Yeah, well done.
Well done. And, of course, there's plenty of local footy finals to get to, so make sure, I'm sure plenty of our listeners are already doing it. Rocky, thank you.
Good on you, Dill. Good on you, Lynchy.
Lynchy, thank you. Will we see you next week?
Good on you, fellas. That was the longest wrap-up of all time, Bill.
Well, I was going to wrap up, but then you asked me about Dustin. Just ask me about that. I'm going to keep going. I've got to get the whole music track out, so it's a good fade out. It's a hitting the post. It's an old broadcasting trick. On that note, we'll catch you next week.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Ned's AFL Unpopular Opinions. Enjoyed the podcasts? Remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.